Welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. 11 days away from midterm elections, and the latest GDP data has come out. While Biden hails it, others point to warning signs. NTD's Iris Tao brings us more.
After 6 months of steady decline, the U.S. economy has rebounded with a 2.6% growth rate in the third quarter, and the president on Thursday cheering that report.
Today, the GDP results came out, and the economy, in fact, is growing. And although it may not feel like it for everyone, people's incomes went up last quarter more than inflation went up.
While the latest GDP numbers do look strong at first glance, there are warning signs about a slowdown. The 2.6 gain was driven almost entirely by a surge in exports, which is likely to be temporary. An increase in government spending also contributed to the gains. Meanwhile, consumer spending, which makes up about 70% of the U.S. economy, is slowing as inflation hurts Americans' buying power. But Biden, who's in New York talking about the economy, calls the latest numbers evidence that his party's economic policies are working, and does as he takes shots at Republicans as midterms are just now 12 days away.
These protections are gone as well if the Republicans get their way, if Kevin gets his way in the Republican Congress. Tax credits to lower energy bills, gone. Corporate minimum tax, gone.
The White House has recently shifted its messaging focus from abortion to the economy, which voters say they're concerned about the most. While Biden is now accusing the GOP of trying to make the economy worse, Republicans say just the opposite.
Just 4 years ago, when Republicans were in the majority, America was on top. We had more jobs and people looking for jobs. We were energy independent. We were energy dominant. Today, the contrast couldn't be any clearer. To be blunt, folks, we're in a hole.
And amid high inflation, the Federal Reserve has announced several aggressive interest rate hikes, and another one is expected to come next week. Meanwhile, a sharp rise in interest rates has led to the biggest contraction in the housing market since the early months of the pandemic. Reporting from the White House, Iris Tao, NTD News.
Iris Tao, thank you for that report from the White House. Mortgage rates rose again this week, rising above 7% for the first time since 2002. Freddie Mac says the 30-year fixed-rate mortgage averaged 7.08% this week. That's up from 6.94% the week before. Mortgage rates have risen nearly every week since late August and have more than doubled since the start of the year. The rapid rise has been fueled by the Fed's unprecedented campaign of hiking interest rates to tame soaring inflation. Also, investors' recession concerns and mixed economic news has made mortgage rates increasingly volatile. And Republican Liz Cheney hopes to have influence on Capitol Hill even after voters ousted her from her seat in Congress. She's endorsed her first Democrat in a key race in Congress. Here's NTD's Melina Wisecup with more.
Congresswoman Liz Cheney says her political career is not over, and she's vowed to work against the tide of former President Trump and his supporters, even if that means working to help Democrats maintain control of Congress. Cheney has now endorsed Democrat Congresswoman Elissa Slotkin in a tight Michigan race that Republicans are trying to flip this November.
Slotkin has bucked her party's leadership and is calling for new blood in D.C. Now she's fighting to hold on to her seat in the newly redrawn 7th District, expected to be one of the most competitive House races. Her opponent, Republican State Senator Tom Barrett. Barrett has raised questions about the 2020 presidential election, joining 10 other state lawmakers back in 2021, asking the U.S. Congress to look into allegations of voter fraud. Slotkin and Cheney both serve on the House Armed Services Committee and will appear together in a campaign rally in Michigan next Tuesday.
And Congresswoman Liz Cheney is not the first Republican to endorse a Democrat over a Republican, countering Republicans' efforts to take back the House. Just a couple of days ago, Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski of Alaska publicly announced that she'd vote to keep Democrat Congresswoman Mary Peltola representing Alaska's only House seat. Peltola just won a special election where she flipped the seat of late Republican Congressman Don Young. Now Republicans want to flip that seat back red. Trump was in Alaska campaigning for Sarah Palin to take that seat, but Senator Murkowski says she's voting the other way and would rather a Democrat hold that House seat over a Trump-endorsed candidate. Now, Trump has also endorsed Murkowski's opponent, Kelly Tshibaka, to replace her in the Senate. Reporting in Washington, D.C., Melina Wisecup, NTD News.
After securing a third term in power, Chinese Communist Party dictator Xi Jinping has spoken on U.S.-China relations. He said China is willing to work with the United States. He called for the countries to, quote, respect each other, live together peacefully, cooperate, and win-win. This is according to Chinese state media CCTV. Many in the U.S. point out that the CCP's actions don't match their talk of cooperation. For instance, stealing U.S. intellectual property, alleged forceful repatriation of dissidents, and economic coercion causing U.S. companies to self-censor. They say Xi asks for respect, while the CCP commits genocide against Uyghurs and other human rights violations like forced organ harvesting. Among the experts watching the rhetoric coming from the Chinese Communist Party, Steve Yates, chair of the China Policy Initiative at America First Policy Institute. I had a chance to ask him about the key takeaways from the CCP's 20th Congress. Steve Yates, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, thank you.
Steve, the CCP has just held its 20th Party Congress where Xi Jinping has taken over absolute power, as they call it. What exactly does this mean to those of us who may not follow China so closely?
Well, for one, there weren't that many new things that came out of the Congress, just acceleration of trends. And for those who have been following what Xi Jinping has done in his first two terms, what this was a consolidation of that movement, that group of personnel, the freezing out of dissenting or other competitive factions. And so it wasn't as if before this Congress, Xi Jinping was playing nice at home. There was still a genocide against the Uyghurs. There was still a crushing of Hong Kong. There was still a threatening of Taiwan. And there were still wolf warriors against the United States before all of this. But what this did was it was an effective coronation. And then the public humiliation of Hu Jintao being escorted out in front of the thousands sitting there stoically was just icing on the cake to show this man, Xi Jinping, is essentially a one-man ruler at this point.
You mentioned Hu Jintao. That was a very interesting spectacle to watch. The former chairman, Xi's predecessor, being wheeled out, very unusual. There's been a lot of speculation as to why. What do you think?
Well, first, I just assume I will never know the truth. But what we do know is how it has been communicated by the people on the stage at the time. Their body language and that interactions actually said a lot. Here's Hu Jintao, who served 2 5-year terms as top communist leader. Many of the people, if not all of the people on that dais, worked for him for that time. If he had some health issue and he was just sort of ailing in some way, they would have turned and patted him on the arm, acknowledged him as he walked by. But if you looked at the face of most of those guys, say like Tiger Yang Jiechi, he sat there as if he had witnessed an execution, just dead straight on, looking out at the audience as if nothing was happening around him, because it was like they feared if they reacted, they could be next. So the body language spoke volumes that this was a power move. And the fact that they said it was a health issue and there's been no explanation of the health issue, that there was a lot of speculation about this marginalizing of him, that he might have been prepared to vote against the leader list or what have you. And the top leadership, with total control of their state media, has never corrected that narrative. So I think we're left only to assume that this was a power move by Xi Jinping and a humiliation of Hu Jintao, which, frankly, I've never seen in all of my years watching Chinese politics.
Yeah, really fascinating to watch. Steve, so this CCTV, the CCP's mouthpiece media outlet, has just come out and said that Xi Jinping wants to essentially extend an olive branch to the United States and work in what they say is each country's mutual interest. What does that actually look like to the CCP?
Well, I think it's just the Communist Party leadership playing clever. They've done a good job of playing clever with the United States and other powers for a long time. Pay no attention to our genocide. Pay no attention to our stealing your intellectual property. Pay no attention to our modernizing military that is threatening you and your friends. But hey, while all that's going on and you're not looking, why don't we go ahead and make some business? And hey, don't impose sanctions on us the way you did Russia. Pay no attention to our support for Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Let's get back to what we did for so long, so well together, give us money in China. And so that to me is what that is a kind of a teaser for. The leaders are supposed to meet at a G20 meeting upcoming in Indonesia. I don't know whether that is actually going to happen as planned, but this is sort of atmospherics, if I'm reading it correctly, before Xi Jinping, for rare occurrence in recent years, will leave China and go to another country and meet face to face with other leaders.
Steve Yates, really appreciate you joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching the Capitol Report. If you want to see our full broadcast, check us out at epochtv.com.